Good evening, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about how to improve in endurance sports. Now, this is a topic very close to my heart because I have dealt with pretty much all the trials and tribulations that one can deal with, at least at the beginner and intermediate stages of trying to improve in endurance sports. So, let's dig right into it. To start, there's something called the gear paradox that plagues pretty much every beginner and even intermediate, sometimes up to experienced endurance athletes. And this includes anywhere between running, triathlon, Ironman. And the gear paradox is basically the tendency to want to purchase gear, supplements, or anything of that sort instead of putting in the hard work that is required to actually make those noticeable gains in your training. And it's not that you stop training or that you don't hit all of your, key pillars of training, so to speak, but it's more that you'd think that there's something out there separate from yourself that is the difference between you and all the other athletes out there, that it's not a skill or a conditioning based issue, and that it's simply your gear is the problem. And I hate to say it, but it is not true at all. At a certain level, yes, your gear is important, and it pretty much stops being important when you have all the basic necessities that you need to perform well in this sport. But aside from that, the most noticeable gains and the biggest difference between the top performers and the beginners is simply time in the game and consistent time in the game. Not just I've been a triathlete for 5 years, but I train, 3 or 4 months out of the year, and I think that's good enough. That's not what I'm talking about. The top performers are noticeably more consistent, more dialed in with their nutrition, and they just care more about their performance in the sport. And, if you don't care about your performance in the sport, then that's really fine. But the bottom line here is that the amount of gains that you'll receive, so to speak, as a result of consistent effort is far greater than any gains that you'll receive just from that next piece of gear, this little handy add-on that you can add to your your training package. Like that's not any of it. Now, that's an obvious one. Consistency is obviously key. There's a number of expressions about, remaining consistent, consistency becoming the or being the driving factor behind progress, all that stuff. But the next part of the equation, aside from consistency, is proper planning. And I kind of hinted at this a little bit before, as a little bit sneak peek in that consistency bit. But planning is probably the most underrated portion of somebody's training plan. Often beginners will struggle with progress because they don't do much planning around their training. They kind of let their training happen to them, and they hit their key sessions whenever time allows, rather than scheduling that time and making sure that you hit each key session on the day that you're supposed to hit that key session, and then also factoring in time there for warming up, cooling down, stretching, recovering. The list goes on endlessly. Your nutrition, but planning is literally the road that consistency rides on. If you're consistent but you don't have a good plan, then you're basically just going to stay at the same level but become really strong at that one small level that you're in. Now, how do you start making progress if you don't know how to plan your training and you don't feel like you're very consistent? Well, there's a few practical tools that you can start implementing that are free. Like, this isn't what most people probably do online. It's not a sales thing. And the first thing that you can do is, one, start engaging yourself in the network or in the triathlon community. Find friends, find people who are interested in the sport. Social media is great for this nowadays, where you can pretty much find a whole host of other people who are literally at the same exact level that you are, and maybe even a step or two ahead of you. And you can connect with them, and you can watch what they do for their training. You can talk with them. You can, you know, really become part of the community. It's worth it. It's worth making the friends who enjoy the same things as you. And maybe you actually find a club that's in your local area where you can train with these people on the weekends, and have a good time while doing it, and not turn your training into something of a job where it's like work, right? So that's the first thing that you can do, because learning from firsthand experience and people who are actually there to enjoy this process with you is the number one way to learn. Over time, you'll just gradually get exposed to more and more of the field. And there's I can't say it's probably the best thing that you can do, especially if you know you're a younger male, younger female also. But the next thing would be, give writing out your training plan a little bit of thought. And as far as this being free, many people have Strava. If you don't have Strava, I recommend using Strava. It is free. And use that to just trend how your training is right now. Allow yourself to work out how you've been working out, maybe even a slightly better version of how you work out, for approximately 3 weeks to a month. And then, based on the numbers that you see as like your weekly running average, your weekly biking average, your weekly swimming average, you can start to get a good feeling as far as where your current fitness level is. And using that level of where you are, you can plan your weekly volume accordingly and start to increase your volume by very small increments week over week. My favorite standard rule is no more than 10% week over week. And this 10% can include not just volume, but intensity. So if you're maintaining the same intensity, then you might want to increase your weekly volume by that 10% week over week. And then the same thing is true for intensity. If you're holding volume steady, then you might want to increase your intensity about 10% week over week. And oftentimes you can get a single number on Strava by looking at, I believe it's your relative strain associated with the workout, or your relative or rate of perceived exertion that a workout has a score associated with it. Now that's where you would get started. The best thing you can do, and this is from personal experience, somebody who trained themselves to do their first Ironman, and that's me, by the way, and somebody who decided to get coached for their second Ironman, one of the best things you can do is get coached and leverage a more experienced perspective on training. The amount that I thought that I knew at the end of my first Ironman versus the amount that I now know after having been coached is like light years away. So if you do have the money and you want to expedite your training and your learning curve, then having a coach would definitely be the way to go. But if you don't have the money and you just want to enjoy the sport and do your best and improve over time, then honestly, you can do it for free. You can do it yourself, and you can do it and have a lot of fun by getting involved in a community. So that's all I had to say about that. That is how you will start to, one, see progress in your training, but two, really start to enjoy endurance sports, whether it's triathlon, Ironman, or marathon training, running. It's really, really anything. And these rules, if you don't do any of those, then these rules really apply to anything. If you want to learn a new hobby, get involved in a new sector of a market, or if you're training for something, then this is the perfect piece of advice for really any of you to take. And that's it. So if you like this video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll catch you in the next video.